194 transient lunar phenomena. There has been historical controversy over whether observed features on the moon's surface change over time. Today, many of these claims are thought to be illusory, resulting from observation under different lighting conditions, poor astronomical seeing, or inadequate drawings. However, outgassing does occasionally occur and could be responsible for a minor percentage of the reported lunar transient phenomena. Recently, it has been suggested that a roughly 3 kilometers (1.9 mi) diameter region of the lunar surface was modified by a gas release event about a million years ago. 195, 196, History of exploration and human presence. Before spaceflight. Pre-telescopic observation, until 1609. Since prehistoric times people have taken note of the moon's phases, its waxing and waning, and used it to keep record of time. Tally sticks, notched bones dating as far back as 20-30,000 years ago, are believed by some to mark the phases of the moon. 197. One of the earliest discovered possible depictions of the moon is a 5,000-year-old rock carving orthostat 47 at Knowth, Ireland. 198, 199. The ancient Greek philosopher Anaxagoras, d. 428 BC, reasoned that the sun and moon were both giant spherical rocks, and that the latter reflected the light of former. 200, 201. 227. Elsewhere in the 5th century BC to 4th century BC, Babylonian astronomers had recorded the 18-year Saros cycle of lunar eclipses, 202, and Indian astronomers had described the moon's monthly elongation. 203. The Chinese astronomer Xishan, fluid 4th century BC, gave instructions for predicting solar and lunar eclipses. 201, 411. In Aristotle's 384-322 BC description of the universe, the moon marked the boundary between the spheres of the mutable elements, earth, water, air and fire, and the imperishable stars of ether, an influential philosophy that would dominate for centuries. 204, Archimedes, 287-212 BC, designed a planetarium that could calculate the motions of the moon and other objects in the solar system. 205. In the 2nd century BC, Seleucus of Seleucia correctly theorized that tides were due to the attraction of the moon, and that their height depends on the moon's position relative to the sunday. 206. In the same century, Aristarchus computed the size and distance of the moon from Earth, obtaining a value of about 20 times the radius of Earth for the distance. Although the Chinese of the Han Dynasty believed the moon to be energy equated to qi, the radiating influence theory recognized that the light of the moon was merely a reflection of the sun, and Jing Fang, 7837 BC, noted the sphericity of the moon. 201, 413, 414. Ptolemy, 9168 AD, greatly improved on the numbers of Aristarchus, calculating the values of a mean distance of 59 times Earth's radius and a diameter of 0.292. Earth diameters were close to the correct values of about 60 and 0.273 respectively. 207. In the 2nd century AD, Lucian wrote the novel A True Story, in which the heroes travel to the moon and meet its inhabitants. In 499 AD, the Indian astronomer Aryabhata mentioned in his Aryabhatiya that reflected sunlight is the cause of the shining of the moon. 208. The astronomer and physicist Alhazen, 965-1039, found that sunlight was not reflected from the moon like a mirror, but that light was emitted from every part of the moon's sunlit surface in all directions. 209. Shinkyo, 1031-1095, of the Song dynasty created an allegory equating the waxing and waning of the moon to a round ball of reflective silver that, when doused with white powder and viewed from the side, would appear to be a crescent dot. 201, 415, 416. During the Middle Ages, before the invention of the telescope, the moon was increasingly recognized as a sphere, though many believed that it was perfectly smooth. 210. Telescopic exploration, 1609 to 1959. Galileo's sketches of the moon from the groundbreaking Sidereus Nuncius, publishing among other findings the first descriptions of the moon's topography. In 1609, Galileo Galilei used an early telescope to make drawings of the moon for his book Sidereus Nuncius, and deduced that it was not smooth but had mountains and craters. Thomas Harriot had made, but not published, such drawings a few months earlier. On an open folio page is a carefully drawn disk of the full moon. In the upper corners of the page are waving banners held aloft by pairs of winged cherubs. In the lower left page corner a cherub assists another to measure distances with a pair of compasses. In the lower right corner a cherub views the main map through a handheld telescope, whereas another, kneeling, peers at the map from over a low cloth-draped table. Map of the Moon by Johannes Hevelius from his Selenographia, 1647. The first map to include Thelebration zones. Telescopic mapping of the Moon followed, later in the 17th century, the efforts of Giovanni Battista Riccioli and Francesco Maria Grimaldi led to the system of naming off lunar features in use today. The more exact 1834-1836 Mappa Selnographica of Wilhelm Beer and Johann Heinrich Madler, and their associated 1837 book Der Mond, the first trigonometrically accurate study of lunar features, included the heights of more than 1,000 mountains, and introduced the study of the moon at accuracies possible in earthly geography. 211. Lunar craters, first noted by Galileo, were thought to be volcanic until the 1870s proposal of Richard Proctor that they were formed by collisions. 60. This view gained support in 1892 from the experimentation of geologist Grove Carl Gilbert, and from a comparative studies from 1920 to the 1940s. 212. Leading to the development of lunar stratigraphy, which by the 1950s was becoming a new and growing branch of astrogeology. 60. First missions to the Moon, 1959-1990. After World War II the first launch systems were developed, and by the end of the 1950s they reached capabilities that allowed the Soviet Union and the United States to launch spacecrafts into space. The Cold War fueled a closely followed development of the launch systems by the two states, resulting in the so-called space race and its later phase, the moon race, accelerating efforts and interest in exploration of the moon. First robotic missions, Soviet Lunar Program 1959 to 1976. First view in history of the far side off Moon, taken by Luna 3, 7 October 1959. Spacecraft from the Soviet Union's lunar program were the first to accomplish a number of goals, following three named, failed missions in 1958, 213. The first human-made object to escape Earth's gravity and pass near the Moon was Luna 1 in 1959. The first human-made object to impact the lunar surface was Luna 2, and the first photographs of the normally occluded far side of the Moon were made by Luna 3, all in 1959. The first image from the lunar surface, photographed by Luna 9 in 1966. The first spacecraft to perform a successful lunar soft landing was Luna 9, and the first vehicle to orbit the Moon was Luna 10. Both in 1966. 60. Rock and soil samples were brought back to Earth by three lunar sample return missions, Luna 16 in 1970, Luna 20 in 1972, and Luna 24 in 1976. which returned 0.3 kilograms total. 214. Luna 17 deployed on the Moon, the first remote-controlled rover on an extraterrestrial surface, a Lunicode 1, in 1970. A replica of Lunicode 1, which reached the Moon, becoming the first remote-controlled rover on an extraterrestrial surface, 1970. First crewed missions, United States Lunar Program 1962 to 1973. During the late 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, the United States Army conducted a classified feasibility study that proposed the construction of a staffed military outpost on the Moon called Project Horizon, with the potential to conduct a wide range of missions from scientific research to nuclear Earth bombardment. The study included the possibility of conducting a lunar-based nuclear test. 215. 216. The Air Force, which at the time was in competition with the Army for a leading role in the space program, developed its own similar plan called LUNEX. 217. 218. 215. However, both these proposals were ultimately passed over as the space program was largely transferred from the military to the civilian agency NASA. 218. The small blue-white semicircle of Earth, almost glowing with color in the blackness of space, rising over the limb of the desolate, cratered surface of the Moon. Earthrise, the first color image of Earth taken by a human from the Moon, during Apollo 8, 1968, the first time a crewed spacecraft left Earth orbit and reached an astronomical body. Following President John F. Kennedy's 1961 commitment to a manned Moon landing before the end of the decade, the United States, under NASA leadership, launched a series of uncrewed probes to develop an understanding of the lunar surface in preparation for human missions. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Ranger program produced the first close-up pictures. The Lunar Orbiter program produced maps of the entire Moon. The Surveyor program landed its first spacecraft 4 months after Luna 9. The crewed Apollo program was developed in parallel, after a series of uncrewed and crewed tests of the Apollo spacecraft in Earth orbit, and spurred on by a potential Soviet lunar human landing. In 1968, Apollo 8 made the first human mission to lunar orbit. The subsequent landing of the first humans on the Moon in 1969 is seen by many as the culmination of the space race. 219. Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the Moon as the commander of the American mission Apollo 11 by first setting foot on the Moon at 2:56 UTC on the 21st of July 1969. 220. An estimated 500 million people worldwide watched a transmission by the Apollo TV camera, the largest television audience for a live broadcast at that time. 221. 222. The Apollo missions 11 to 17. Except Apollo 13, which aborted its planned lunar landing, removed 380.05 kilograms, 837.87 pound, of lunar rock and soil in 2,196 separate samples. 223. Scientific instrument packages were installed on the lunar surface during all the Apollo landings. Long-lived instrument stations, including heat flow probes, seismometers, and magnetometers, were installed at the Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17 landing sites. Direct transmission of data to Earth concluded in late 1977 because of budgetary considerations. 224. 225. Butas. The station's lunar laser ranging corner cube retroreflector arrays are passive instruments. They are still being used. Ranging to the stations is routinely performed from Earth-based stations with an accuracy of a few centimeters, and data from this experiment are being used to place constraints on the size of the lunar core. 226. the American moon landing and return was enabled by considerable technological advances in the early 1960s, in domains such as ablation chemistry, software engineering, and atmospheric re-entry technology, and by highly competent management of the enormous technical undertaking. 227, 228, Apollo 17 in 1972 remains the last crewed mission to the Moon. Explorer 49 in 1973 was the last dedicated U.S. probe to the Moon until the 1990 Moon Treaty and Explorational Absence, 1976-1990. A near-lunar quietude followed the 24th and last lunar as well as Soviet mission to the Moon in 1976 until 1990, for 14 years. Astronautics had shifted its focus towards the exploration of the inner, for example Venera program, and outer, E.G. Pioneer 10, 1972, solar system planets, but also towards Earth orbit, developing and continuously operating, beside communication satellites, Earth observation satellites, for example Landsat program, 1972, space telescopes and particularly spacer stations, for example Salyut program, 1971. The until 1979 negotiated Moon Treaty, with its ratification in 1984 by its few signatories, was about the only major activity regarding the Moon until 1990. Renewed exploration, 1990 present. In 1990 Haiten Hagoromo, 229, the first dedicated lunar mission since 1976, reached the Moon. Sent by Japan, it became the first mission that was not a Soviet Union or US mission to the Moon. In 1994, the US dedicated again for the first time since 1973 a mission to fly a spacecraft, Clementine, to the Moon. This mission obtained the first near-global topographic map of the Moon, and the first global multispectral images of the lunar surface. 230. In 1998 this was followed by the Lunar Prospector mission, which's instruments indicated the presence of excess hydrogen at the lunar poles, which is likely to have been caused by the presence of water ice in the upper few meters of the regolith within permanently shadowed craters. 231. The next year saw a row of first missions to the Moon by a new group of STATI actively exploring the Moon. Between 2004 and 2006 the first spacecraft by the European Space Agency, ESA, SMART 1, reached the Moon, recording the first detailed survey of chemical elements on the lunar surface. 232. The Chinese lunar exploration program began with Chang'e 1 between 200 and 2009, 233, obtaining a full image map of the Moon. India reached the Moon in 2008 for the first time with its Chandrayaan-1, creating a high-resolution chemical, mineralogical and photogeological map of the lunar surface, and confirming the presence of water molecules in the lunar soil. 234. Neil Armstrong, the first human on the Moon, working at the lunar module Eagle, a first lunar base during Apollo 11, 1969. The first moon landing, one of the first moon rocks, a lunar base of 70,017, Apollo 17, 1972, which were collected during the Apollo missions. NASA's Moon Mineralogy Map equipment on India's Chandrayaan-1 for the first time discovered in 2008 water-rich minerals, light blue, shown in blue around a small crater from which it was ejected. The US launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, and the Gross Impactor on the 18th of June, 2009. LCROS completed its mission by making a planned and widely observed impact in the crater Cabus on the 9th of October 2009, 235, whereas LRO is currently in operation. obtaining precise lunar altimetry and high-resolution imagery. China continued its lunar program in 2010 with Chang'e 2, mapping the surface at a high resolution over an 8-month period, and in 2013 with Chang'e 3, a lunar lander, deploying a lunar rover, named Yuchu, Chinese, literally Jade Rabbit.